discussion in the court about young lawyers and 5-year lawyers and whatever. At the time you got involved in the Paxton matter, Mr. Cammack, you were a 5-year lawyer, right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Oso, younger than you or older than you?
He's younger than me.
Let me begin sort of near the back and the marshals coming to your office. You learned eventually, did you not, that the purpose or the reason the marshals came to your office was because of the visit that you'd made to I guess the widow or the widower at the clerk's office, right?
I learned that from my lawyer, Andy Drumheller.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Paxton hadn't sent you to that clerk's office or anything of the sort, right?
No, sir.
That was Nate Paul. You met with Mr. Hardin how many times before you testified?
I've spoken with him 3 times.
When was the first time?
I believe it was in the last 2 weeks. I'm sorry, I don't remember the specific date.
About how long was that meeting, Brandon?
That was approximately 4 to 5 hours, I believe.
And the next time you met with him?
I met with him last week when I came out here. I thought I was going to be testifying on Friday.
And about how long was that?
Hour and a half to 2 hours.
And did you meet with him again last night?
Met with him last night for maybe an hour.
So that's a total of how many hours that you met with Mr. Hardin?
Roughly 7.
Could we see article of impeachment, article number 5? Have you studied, I assume you have not, Mr. Cammack, the articles of impeachment in this case?
No, sir, not studied them.
But if I suggested to you, this is, quote, why you're here, close quote, could you agree with me?
Yes, sir. I've read this. I've seen this.
All right. Did Mr. Hardin ask you or show you this article in any of those 8 or so hours?
I don't recall seeing this.
So in the 8 hours that you met with Hardin, he never showed you the relevant article that brings you here. So let's take it apart. It says, while holding office as Attorney General, Warren Kenneth Paxton misused his official powers by violating the laws governing the appointment of prosecuting attorneys pro tem. Will you agree with me, Mr. Cammack, that you were not a prosecuting attorney pro tem? Agree with me on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It goes on to say that Paxton engaged Cammack, a licensed attorney, to conduct an investigation into a baseless complaint. Mr. Hardin never asked you about that? That language?
I'm sorry, could you
Sure.
rephrase that? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, sure. Mr. Hardin never went over this language in the article of impeachment with you, right?
No, sir.
And you will agree with me, Mr. Cammack, that you certainly never believed that you were a part of an investigation into a baseless complaint, right?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. 8 hours and you've never asked that question by Mr. Hardin, right?
We didn't talk about a baseless complaint.
Okay. Let's go for strike 3, although you just need 1. It says, during which Cammack issued more than 30 grand jury subpoenas in an effort to benefit Nate Paul or Paul's business entities. You would agree with me, Mr. Cammack, that was not your purpose. You were not there trying to benefit Nate Paul or his business entities. That's not why you agreed to get involved in this. Agreed?
Absolutely not. I didn't even know Nate Paul or his entities or anything like that.
Mr. Hardin has a reputation as not a good lawyer, a great lawyer, right?
Yes, sir.
Could you give us a reason why a lawyer as good as Mr. Hardin would have never asked you those critical questions?
In the words of a great American, Your Honor, it's calling for speculation.
Sustained.
Well, if that's a suggestion that I'm a great American, I'll take it. Let's go back. I think what may be lost in some of this, Mr. Cammack, is this is in the late summer or fall of 2020, right?
Yes, sir.
And this is when, I don't want to say COVID is raging, but COVID is ever-present, omniscient. It's taken over the world, right?
It's peak COVID. Yes, sir.
Peak COVID. So here you are, a younger lawyer. If I understand it correctly, you had just left, not too long before this, practice with your father, right?
That's correct.
He is also a criminal defense lawyer.
Yes, sir.
So you have your own practice, right?
Yes, sir.
You had tried a number of cases with your dad, I assume, a number of cases with others, right?
And myself. Yes, sir.
And yourself. And you had tried, I guess, I'm assuming, anything from misdemeanor cases to felony cases,
Yes,
right?
sir.
You weren't some kid straight out of law school that couldn't find a courtroom door with a seeing-eye dog and a search warrant. I mean, generally speaking, you knew what you were doing at the Harris County Courthouse, right?
Absolutely.
So along comes COVID, and like a lot of Americans, what you took for granted suddenly was an issue, right? Meaning your business, our business stopped. It didn't slow down. It came to a screeching halt, right?
Yes, sir.
Arrests went way down. Courthouses literally closed, right?
They did.
So you're rolling along, I assume, and you get a call from Mr. Wynne that the Attorney General might be calling you, right?
That's right.
Now, I assume you never aspired to be a prosecutor or you would apply to the DA's office, but still, when the Attorney General calls, that's a big moment, right?
It was a big moment.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You trusted Mr. Wynne, right?
I did.
He's a Harvard-educated lawyer. You were aware of that?
He's a serious lawyer.
He's a serious lawyer. And I assume that up to this point in time, Mr. Cammack, you didn't have any real personal connection in terms of going out and having drinks or having dinner or whatever with Mr. Cammack, but you knew him professionally slash socially, and you respected him, right?
With Michael Wynne.
Yes, sir.
Just an acquaintance who was part of a couple clubs I was, and we had worked on that COVID-19 panel with some of the district court and federal judges, and he seemed like a nice person.
Okay.
So,
He had a significant practice, at least from your perspective.
serious practice, yes.
So it's good news, and if I'm remembering your direct correctly, the call from Mr. Paxton or from General Paxton came on your birthday.
Yes, it was on my birthday.
Now, you're thinking, what a great birthday present, right?
Something at the time I was like, oh, wow, what a coincidence.
And look at you now, Mr. Cammack. Didn't turn out to be that perfect, did it?
I never would have imagined in a million years getting that call to sitting in an impeachment hearing, sir.
Got it. So let's go completely sideways for a second. If there has been a suggestion, Mr. Cammack, that it is wrong or illegal to challenge or investigate the legality of a search, that is not your worldview, right?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Sure. If there has been a suggestion made in this courtroom before these 31 senators that it is somehow wrong or illegal to investigate the legality of a search or a search warrant, that is not your worldview. Agree with me?
I agree with that.
I mean, it's sort of born and bred in a criminal defense lawyer. That's part of what we do. You would agree with me?
That is what we do.
And any criminal defense lawyer, I think, that's been practicing longer than 6 weeks has probably challenged the legality of a search warrant. You would agree with me?
Yes, sir.
And has probably looked into the conduct of law enforcement agents in either the creation of a search warrant, right?
That's right.
The execution of a search warrant, right?
That's right.
Again, that's called Wednesday in our business. That's what we do.
That's a Wednesday on our business. Yep.
Now, would you also agree with me that not only do we have, I guess, the choice of challenging or investigating the legality of searches, but we have the obligation to do it on behalf of our clients, right?
Right. We're just on the other side of it.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
And if we don't do that on occasion, we can get sued by the client, right?
That's right.
We can have a grievance filed against us by the client, by the state bar, or someone else for failure to investigate that sort of claim, right?
That's right.
And I guess my long-winded point there is when you were asked by Ken Paxton, and we will get to that conversation, but when you were asked by Ken Paxton or told by Ken Paxton he wanted you to investigate the possibility of an illegal search or the creation of an illegal search warrant by agents, that was like, great. That's in my wheelhouse. That's what I do, right?
Well, it was an investigation into potential violations of the Texas Penal Code, which is what I'm familiar with doing. So it would be in my wheelhouse.
Right. So it's in your wheelhouse, in your strike zone, whatever, right?
Right.
And the fact that, oh my God, it's a federal agent, or oh my God, it's a federal magistrate. I mean, again, they deserve and are owed their deference, but there's nothing sacrosanct about an AUSA in our worldview, right?
I have complete respect for government officials, but, you know, Mr. Paxton also believed that, hey, this is a serious accusation. It requires a serious focus. And, you know, if someone's doing something like that, they should be held accountable for it.
And I assume, Mr. Cammack, you felt the same way.
I did feel that way.
Now, jumping ahead a little bit, but I think in one of the conversations, Mr. Cammack, you had, or one of the answers to one of Mr. Hardin's questions, that somewhere along the line you heard either Mr. Wynne, I believe, or Mr. Nate Paul say something, quote, and this is a statement attributable to Mark Penley, there's no amount of information that could be presented to him that would ever convince him that a federal official could commit a crime, right?
That's right.
And which person said that? Was it Mr. Paul that said that about Mr. Penley, or Mr. Wynne that said that about Mr. Penley, or do you know?
It was Mr. Paul said that.
Okay.
Mr. Wynne was there when he said that.
Okay. And that's just not the house that you live in.
I don't live in that house.
You don't feel that same way, right?
I don't feel that same way, no.
I'm assuming,
Excuse me, can the witness be a little closer to the mic and speak up a little bit?
All right, Judge.
Mr. Cammack, that you view federal prosecutors and magistrates and judges just like defense lawyers, bankers, bakers, trash truck drivers, whatever. There are good ones out there, and there are bad ones out there.
Base people off of their character. I mean,
That's right.
That's it.
And you do not automatically foreclose from your mind or from your obligations an inquiry into the legality of a search warrant simply because it was signed off by a federal magistrate, right? That's a mouthful. There's nothing improper in your worldview about investigating a search warrant or the validity of a search warrant simply because it is signed off by a federal magistrate, right?
No, I mean, that's, as a defense lawyer, that's what we do, is challenge the validity of a search warrant. I mean, this was just on the other side of it, where that person could be held accountable for it.
Now, let's get to your first meeting with Ken Paxton. On your birthday, I think the 22nd, he calls, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure you have been asked this question 287 times, but the best of your recollection, he says what to you when he calls you, Mr. Cammack?
I didn't speak with him that day. It wasn't until the 23rd that I spoke with him, and he said that he got my name from Michael Wynne. I think the words were, my name was dropped in a hat, and he got my name from Michael Wynne and wanted to see if I'd be interested in coming to talk to him about working on a criminal investigation.
And that would have been, if it's the day after your birthday, that would have been August 23rd?
Yes, sir.
And did he give you any detail about what he wanted to, what was the job description specifically that he wanted you to do?
Not at that time. It wasn't until I went out there and met with him in person that I found that out.
Okay, and if I'm recalling it correctly, there was some request by someone to bring a resume, right?
Yes, sir.
And it had been a while since you had a resume, right?
Yes, sir.
But you figured, well, if I've got to audition for the beauty contest, I'll find a swimsuit, I'll get a resume together, right?
Just trying to remain humble and do what he asked me to do.
Okay. And you met with him, right?
Yes, sir, on the 26th.
On the 26th, Mr. Paxton, General Paxton is, I mean, you knew him by sight, right?
Yes, sir.
He's gracious, professional, nice enough to you.
He was nice, yes.
And on that day, on the 26th, Mr. Cammack, can you share with us the description of what he wanted you to do?
At that time, he told me that he was looking to hire a special prosecutor to investigate whether, I guess, these federal agents had tampered with or altered a search warrant. Basically violations of state law.
Okay. And again, we've talked about that's kind of in your wheelhouse.
Correct.
You spend 20, 30 minutes with General Paxton?
Probably 20, 25, something like that.
And he uses the phrase special prosecutor, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
So we've heard that sort of go through the evolution of your story, but it is true that he was the person that first put those words into your mindset, right?
Yes, sir.
If I heard your testimony directly, then, Mr. Cammack, you go down the hall and you meet with Jeff Mateer, right?
Yes, sir.
And did he act like he knew why you were there?
He did.
And just collapse the conversation succinctly that you had with Mr. Mateer.
Yeah, so I had another copy of my resume. I handed it to him, and I said, well, it was kind of awkward for a second, just communicating with him. But he said, I said, you know, I'm here to interview about the special prosecutor position for this investigation with respect to the search warrant. And he acknowledged that,
Okay.
And said, oh yeah, you know, I know a little bit about that, and just kind of act disengaged.
Gotcha. And I think that was the phrase that you used with Mr. Hardin, disengaged, right?
Yes, sir.
But I guess my point, at least right here, Mr. Cammack, is the phrase special prosecutor was discussed with Jeff Mateer, right?
That's correct.
And at no time did Jeff Mateer say, oh, no, you're not going to be a special prosecutor. We can't hire special prosecutors. That never happened, right?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Mateer, disengaged as he was, did he ever indicate to you, Mr. Cammack, that there was no need for a special prosecutor being hired?
He did not.
Did he ever indicate to you that he felt like this investigation was a baseless complaint?
His attitude was kind of like that, like he didn't feel like it was important or worth pursuing.
It didn't rise to his level of importance.
That's fair to say.
Okay. But he certainly never said or suggested to you that this was a crime or illegal for you to be interviewing for this job. Agree
He did
with me?
not. He did not.
Okay. Now, you don't get the thumbs up that day, but you leave. You're optimistic, hopeful about it, right?
That's right.
And to put us back in your worldview at the time, again, we're in the middle of COVID. Let me stop back. I over theatrically demonstrated or referred to how long you'd spent with Mr. Hardin. You and I did meet last night, right?
Yes, sir.
Spoke for 45 minutes or so.
About 45 minutes.
It was late, right?
It was late.
And it was after Mr. Hardin
I
had
met with Mr. Hardin, and then me and my lawyers came and talked to you for about 45 minutes.
Gotcha. So we have discussed this before. I'm not just getting lucky with every single answer.
We have talked about this, yes, sir.
Okay. So you're hopeful. Again, we got COVID. You're thinking the Attorney General. This is great. I believe that on your drive home, you call your grandmother, right?
I think I told you that. It's like,
did.
hey, I met the Attorney General.
Right.
Yeah.
And your grandma says, I guess, would act like any other grandma. So good for you. That's awesome.
That was her attitude.
So you then go through a series of exchanges about whether or not you might have a conflict, right? Potential conflict with any other cases at the Attorney General's office.
Yes,
correct?
sir. Mr. Vassar at some point reached out to me about a contract.
Okay.
And told me that I needed to do a conflicts check.
Did Mr. Vassar ever suggest to you, Mr. Cammack, that you were unqualified?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Vassar ever express to you that hiring, whether we call you an outside counsel or special prosecutor, whatever, did he ever express to you that the hiring of you was unnecessary?
No, sir. He reached out to me to set up a phone call. And then on that phone call with him, I said, yeah, I'm interviewing, or he's calling me, I guess you're calling me about the special prosecutor position. And then he's acknowledged that, asked for my email address, and I think we talked a little bit briefly about where he had gone to school and that type of thing. So he's, I told him the same thing that I told Mr. Mateer as well.
But he never gave you any pushback on the idea of you getting hired for this job, right?
I never got any pushback from anyone at the Attorney General's office until I got a cease and desist letter.
Say that again.
I never got any pushback from anyone at the Attorney General's office or the Travis County District Attorney's office or anything until I got a cease and desist letter.
In fact, Mr. Cammack, it's true, is it not, that in your, effort to be compliant, appropriate, righteous, that's probably overstating it, but in your effort to do the right thing, you called the State Bar of Texas Ethics Hotline and described what you were going through, right?
I did, sir.
And without getting into what they told you, you walked away from that conversation after explaining to the ethics hotline at the State Bar of Texas what you wanted to do. You felt like you had a blessing from the State Bar of Texas to do exactly what you do, right?
Told me congratulations on the job.
So in the middle of this alleged conspiratorial dark worldview effort, you're calling the State Bar just to make sure you are literally dotting your I and crossing your T.
That's
right?
correct.
Now, I think Mr. Hardin had you talk about your expectations about your sort of bell curve or what have you of ability. In other words, when you first met with Mr. Paxton, I think you thought, I can investigate, I can issue grand jury subpoenas, I can appear in front of a grand jury, I can make recommendations to the grand jury. Heck, I might even get to go try this case. That was kind of your worldview when you went into this, right?
I didn't think there would be any limitation all the way up into potentially presenting the case for a charging instrument, whether it be an indictment, a complaint, an information, or trying the case in front of a jury panel. So once I got my contract, then I realized how limited of a scope it was.
Yes, sir. You anticipated my next area question. Once you got the contract back, it was sort of the real world of, no, I'm not going to be presenting this case to a grand jury. No, I'm not going to be making recommendations. No, I'm not going to be trying the case, but I'm going to be investigating the case, right?
Yes, I was just still happy to be working for the Attorney General.
Got it. Now, and I don't know when you want to break, Mr. President.
I was going to go to about 3:10, about 15 more minutes.
That's fine. At some point along the way, you and General Paxton had a discussion about your hourly rate. You said $300 an hour, right?
Yes, sir.
And you would agree with me that all things being equal, that's a pretty reasonable, moderate rate, right?
Yes, sir.
I guess, Mr. Cammack, the more important than the money was sort of the prestige or the opportunity or the resume, if you will, of getting to work for the AG's office on this particular matter.
I thought it was a fair rate, and it was not about the money. And I have a whole business before all of this that I still have today. So it was not about the money. It was about trying to help out.
All right, so refresh my memory of when you get a contract from, and refresh my memory, I should know, but I don't. You got a contract from whom and on what date, the first contract you received?
I received a contract, this was my mistake, but the contract came in on September 3rd in my email, and Mr. Paxton asked me, did I receive it?
Okay.
But I didn't see it. It got lost in the shuffle of all the other emails. So I responded back and said, no, I didn't get it. And then Mr. Vassar resent it to me on September the 4th of 2020.
So you have a recollection of Vassar specifically sending you this contract, right?
I do, sir.
And when you received this contract from Mr. Vassar, you think that is neither one of us are contract lawyers, but you think that's an offer, and by signing it and sending it back, you think that's an acceptance.
Yes, sir. I spoke with him, Mr. Vassar, about the contract.
Right?
I spoke with Mr. Paxton about the contract. He followed up to see if I got the contract.
Right?
He said he could get me the hourly rate. I told him I was coming back out there. I mean, to me, it was very clear that I was being hired for this position. And so I signed it and returned it to Mr. Vassar that day when I got home.
Gotcha. And no one suggested to you during that month of September that they had their fingers crossed and you really didn't have an agreement. In other words, you went through that month believing you had a valid contract with the state of Texas to be an outside lawyer, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I think you told us that you, Mr. Cammack, attended a meeting with Nate Paul on September 4th, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
And that's here in Austin, right?
Yes, sir.
Let me back up. So, Michael Wynne tells you, hey, the AG might be calling, the AG calls, right? And then you learn at some point that Michael Wynne not only had recommended you, but was Nate Paul's lawyer, who was the complainant, for lack of a better description, in this illegal search warrant claim, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you know when it was, Mr. Cammack, that you learned that Wynne was representing Nate Paul?
Yes, sir. It was once I got confirmation about the job, I guess, and
Okay.
I sent, Michael reached out to me and said to come meet with him and the complainant, Michael or Nate Paul, on September 4th.
Now, Mr. Harden asked you if you did any research about Nate Paul, or you Googled Nate Paul, or words to that effect, right?
He asked me that, yes, sir.
And when is the first time you have a recollection of doing that? Before you met with Paul or after you met with Paul?
Before I met with him, I just Googled him.
And you knew, obviously, at some point that he had a search warrant run on his home and his properties and his business and all of that, right?
Yes, sir.
You didn't come across news articles about that in your search, however long that was or wasn't, right?
No, sir.
But what you came across were articles where, for lack of a better description, he's the new golden child of commercial real estate in Austin. He's the new king or whatever, right?
It was just headlines about his career as a real estate developer.
From your perception, Mr. Cammack, you thought you were sitting in front of or meeting with a valid gentleman or person of substantial economic means, I guess.
I thought, okay, serious guy, businessman, serious lawyer, serious case. I took it very seriously.
Okay. So nothing about this, I guess I'm stumbling into, nothing about this was off-putting to you. You didn't think that there was, in fact, you thought this case just keeps getting better and better for me, right?
I was just trying to focus on the facts of what I was being presented with. I didn't know any of these people.
Okay. So you meet with him in Austin. I believe you said you met with him for an hour and a half, 2 hours, right?
Yes, sir.
And I say him. Nate Paul is there. Michael Wynne is there, right?
Yes, sir.
Ken Paxton is not at this first meeting, if I understand it, correct?
No, sir. He was not there.
And they are explaining to you, that is Mr. Wynne and Mr. Paul are explaining to you their theory about why the search warrants may be invalid and why they might have been altered, right?
Yes, sir.
And I wasn't there, but as I understand it, Mr. Paul showed you, made a pretty convincing presentation utilizing a computer, diving into the metadata, which at least convinced you that this probably happened or this might have happened, right?
I was convinced.
You were convinced.
Something there.
Okay.
I didn't make a judgment either way, but it was a persuasive presentation.
How computer literate are you, Mr. Cammack? And that's a vague question. You know much about metadata?
No, I've never really worked with metadata in that way.
Okay. But it at least appeared to you at that time that Mr. Paul was literate in that area, made this explanation, made this explanation, and you accepted it, right?
Yes, sir. I was told that this presentation was also given to Mr. Penley and Mr. Maxwell as well. So it was just me, my set of eyes looking at it, and I thought it was persuasive.
And you leave there, I think, and go meet with Ken Paxton at his office here in Austin the same day.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Do you recall how you described your worldview of the explanation that, I don't know why I can't talk. I'm paid to talk. You told Ken Paxton, I think, Mr. Cammack, words to the effect of, I think there may be something there, General.
I told him I was convinced, it was convincing what I was shown, and he agreed with that.
Okay. Now, let's go there. When you say it's convincing, exactly what words did you say?
I said it was convincing, it was persuasive, and he agreed with that. He said, yeah, I agree.
Paxton agreed with you.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Now, at no time, you would agree with me, I think, that did Paxton ever suggest to you that this investigation was a baseless investigation, right?
No, he never indicated that it was a baseless.
You believed, recognizing that you don't know what's in his head, but you believe that he believed the same thing that you believe, right?
Yes, sir.
At some point during this meeting with Ken Paxton, after you had met with Nate Paul, I think it is then that General Paxton says to you, get me a wet ink copy of the search warrant, right?
He said that after we got back from the press conference and I was getting ready to go.
That the same day?
Same day.
Okay, so.
He did say that.
And they probably understood it after Mr. Hardin explained it, but just so that I'll be on the same page with it, a wet ink copy is a copy that is actually signed with ink by a judge, right?
It would just be the original document.
And your understanding of why a wet ink copy was important is it could, if not definitively, then go a long way in establishing whether that warrant had been improperly altered or not, right?
Yes, sir, that was my understanding.
And the words of General Paxton to you, I think, were along the lines of, if you can find me a wet ink copy of this search warrant, that's all I need, game's over, right?
It was, if the wet ink copy is the same as the PDF document that was provided to Nate Paul and his lawyers, if they're the same, then it's over.
It's over, meaning he would be satisfied.
Would be satisfied with that, and if if they were different, then obviously this thing's going to take a little longer to
Okay.
figure out.
Now, did General Paxton ever pressure you to find a given or a specific result?
With respect to my ultimate conclusions about
sir.
what I thought happened?
Yes, sir.
No, he never pressured me one way or the other.
He didn't say, you got to do this, dude. I need one. I mean, if you get this done for me, you got a big job. I mean, there was never any suggestion of you engaging in any sort of impropriety or a request for any sort of impropriety on the part of General Paxton. Agree with me?
I agree with that.
Did he use verbiage like, look, I just want to know the truth. Just tell me find the truth in this thing. You remember that?
I do.
And when was it, Mr. Cammack, that General Paxton first told you, I just want to know the truth or find the truth?
That would have been in our first meeting on August 26th when I first went out for the job interview.
So to be clear, before you were ever hired, that was his directive to you. I just want to know the truth. Find me the truth.
It was, yeah, I just want to know the truth, and if something happened, that would be an injustice.
Okay. Now, there has been a lot of discussion, Mr. Cammack, about evidence and what's not evidence and that sort of thing. At the time that you first met with Mr. Paul and Mr. Wynne, do you believe they gave you at least some type of evidence for you to begin an investigation in good faith based upon?
They gave me, they told me the story about what happened, and I took some handwritten notes, and then when I left there, I was given like this timeline of events to kind of, I guess, help me digest everything.
Okay. And so you set about doing what a lawyer should do. That is investigating, right?
That's right.
And you could have done a number of things in this investigation. I assume one of the things you could have done is knocked on doors and started interviewing people, right?
Yes, sir.
But you didn't do that, if I understand it correctly. Instead of knocking on doors, if I'm understanding what you did, you issued subpoenas or chose to have grand jury subpoenas issued, right?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me, Mr. Cammack, that the very intent and purpose of having the grand jury subpoenas issued was for you to be able to obtain that information without causing any alarm or concern on the part of the people of whom you were seeking the information?
That is correct.
All right. So for a week and a half, we have heard, oh my God, the grand jury subpoenas would intimidate these people and frighten these people and scare these people. It was exactly 180 degrees opposite from that. Your intention was to do the exactly opposite of that, right?
Can I explain that?
Yes, sir.
But yes, sir, to answer your question, when I spoke with Mr. Paxton about the idea of grand jury subpoenas, he said it was a smart idea because some of these individuals were people in positions of power, and this would be the most discreet way to get that information.
So if I'm understanding that conversation, then not only did you believe that was the most discreet way to obtain the information without alarming or frightening somebody, so did General Paxton, right?
Yes, sir.
Can we break now? Is that okay?
Members, we will stand at ease until 3:30, so a 25-minute break.